So Luxembourg, obviously, not even most people don't even know where that country is because it's so small, right? Or they think it's the Luxembourg in Wisconsin. But there is a very passionate group of immigrants living here in southeastern Wisconsin, and just getting a hold of the email list that the museum had and to activating the people who are really passionate about the brands was my starting point. So I have this big email list, and I can activate people to come to a festival or a beer tasting, and then kind of working out from there was my initial strategy.
All right, let's get this going. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another Over the Pint episode, the podcast that puts the focus on the fast-paced world of marketing told through the eyes of industry veterans, people who are in the trenches, people who've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. There's no theory here, guys. This is real world. This is practical experience. The crew today, Mr. Kurtl, Vice President of Celtic Advertising. Celtic is a full-service agency located in Milwaukee's historic Third Ward. Myself, Pat McGovern, Director of New Business Development over at Acedia, an award-winning digital agency also located in Milwaukee. Rob Ebert is our guest today. Rob is the Marketing Director at Ansay International. In this role, Rob is responsible for setting and guiding the strategy for all communications, including owned, earned, paid, and social media for Ansay International and Ansay Development Corporation. The Ansay empire is just very, very interesting. Rob is a key cog in that empire. We're going to be diving in deep talking about this. Ansay International is dedicated to helping small family-owned businesses in Luxembourg get a bigger foothold here in the United States. One of their products is Bofferding Beer. We're going to be talking more about that. We're going to be talking more with Rob about his great background. And let's just get into it. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome, Rob.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. I've been a fan of the show for a long time. And yeah, it's an honor to be speaking with you guys today.
That's awesome.
Rob, we got a tradition here. It's called Over a Pint for a reason. What we like to do is find out what people are drinking. I'm sure with your representation, you're probably having a Coors. Am I right on that? Or something else?
I'm going with the green and silver today, Bofferding Beer.
Bofferding Beer. Mr. Lingo, what do you got?
Well, I don't think we're going to have a Home Alone moment today, like where it's like, I'm going to follow Rob. I mean, of course, I'm having Bofferding Beer today as well. So cheers, Rob. Thanks for joining us today.
Cheers.
I'm going to complete the trifecta, guys. Cheers, everyone. This is... Rob, I'm not saying this just because you're on the show. I really like this beer.
Good beer.
I mean, this is a really it's
Crisp.
Kurt and I were trying. It's like it's a nice light beer that's got it's just got a very nice flavor, a very nice taste. It's just it's really, really good.
What I always tell people is, the brewery was founded in 1764, so. They've been around for over 250 years, so they're either making really good beer or they've been able to fool people for a very long time. I like to think it's the former.
I do too. I think it's the former as well.
64, that's crazy. Rob, for everybody, I gave a brief intro, but give us your elevator speech. Give us give the listeners a bit of background about you, and you've touched a lot of different areas of marketing. So. Take the mic, sir, and run with it.
Well, I like to say that I'm a storyteller, and I was a storyteller before that became probably the number one buzzword I see on LinkedIn profiles everywhere. But I've been a storyteller since before I could even write. So I used to dictate stories to my mom. She would write them down, and then I would illustrate them with pictures. And I started doing that in kindergarten. And, from there, I was a journalism student in college, and I started my career as a journalist, writing for a newspaper. And from there, that really led to what I do now in advertising through a couple different ad agencies and now at Ansay International, telling the stories of these products, the people behind them, and the people that enjoy them.
So, Rob, one of the where you and I crossed paths, where we both did a little bit of time at the BDK, but you had been with other agencies prior to that, and then went on. So, talk a little bit about just your agency, kind of your agency background, and then you made an interesting shift, because when you and I were kind of connecting, you were the quote social guy, unquote, right? I mean, that's the space. But now, but now you're not that. I mean, you're that and much more. So just talk to us a little bit about your background with that, but just how that transformation just happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you'll see through my story that a lot of it is being in the right place at the right time for things. But where this all really started was working at the newspaper. So I worked at the Oshkosh Northwestern up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin for 5 years. And I did not realize it at the time, but it was definitely building all the skills and the skill sets that I use now in advertising that I used when I was a social media executive. And what I mean by that is it was a blessing, too, to work at a smaller paper. So I think the circulation was about 30,000 there. But so I got assigned a lot of duties and stories that if I had started at the Journal Sentinel, would have gone to a much more senior editor, or they would have had a bigger staff to handle all the requirements. But when I started at the newspaper, I started writing stories. So I was a reporter, but then I also did page design. I did photography. I shot video. I hosted an online show featuring high school athletes throughout the area. And I had to do all of this on a deadline every single night. And there's few better things for accountability than whatever you did that day, the next day, 30,000 people are going to see, and your name is directly attached to it. So I learned, I hadn't gone to school for photography or for video, or certainly not for hosting an online show and being a host. But I just had to figure those things out. And the other thing that really made me there too was just the hours. I worked holidays, I worked nights, I worked weekends, really just trying to make a name for myself, and that's what was asked of me. And really some incredible experiences came out of that time. So I'll tell you one particular story, and then I'll get into my agency life. But Oshkosh is home to the Experimental Aircraft Association. When they have their big fly-in, it actually becomes the world's busiest airport. So I was assigned to that, like every reporter at the newspaper, and we're out there doing videos, doing photography, doing stories, all those sorts of things. And it turns out Harrison Ford is a pretty big pilot.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so he was actually head of, they call it the Young Wings program, the program to get kids interested in flying. And he was flying in for a keynote address. And someone had tipped me off to that, and so I was kind of hanging out, and they have a big aircraft hangar where the event was going to happen. And I noticed a guy walking in with an entourage or whatever it is of about 5 people, and I'm like, oh gosh, that's Harrison Ford. So I remember chasing him down through this aircraft hangar and just being like, "Excuse me, Mr. Ford, Rob with the local newspaper. Do you have a few minutes for a story?" And he was very gracious and gave me his time for that. And here I am, like a 23-year-old interviewing Han Solo for the local newspaper. So I had all these crazy experiences, and I was there in 2007, 2008. There's the Senate race between Ron Johnson and Russ Feingold going on. So Ron Johnson is from Oshkosh. And so one weekend I got assigned to go cover that race, and I interviewed now Senator Johnson. And if you go back to that era too, you remember how big the Tea Party was. Well, I wound up hanging out with Joe the plumber one day and interviewing him for a story. So I got all these, these great experiences and telling different stories and all those things. And so that really helped me transfer when I got hired at Kramer Krasselt in Milwaukee. And within 6 months of being hired, I found myself on top of a volcano in Iceland shooting an off-roading video. So just this and like things I had to look around and be like, is this really happening right now?
They're paying me to do this?
Yeah, exactly. And I really have to thank the people that surrounded me. So at the paper, they're just like, go cover these things, do all, figure this all out. And I was really blessed to work with a guy by the name of Jason Luss at Kramer Krasselt, who really gave me that same kind of leeway. I mean, I was a journalist coming into a brand new field. And I remember being in meetings and I had a notebook, and I'm sure everyone thought I was studiously taking notes of what was going on. And in reality, I was writing down terms I had never heard before so I could go back to my desk and look up what KPI meant and what scalability meant, and kind of learning all these things as I went along. So I was assigned to Can-Am Off-Road, the ATV company, and Can-Am Spyder, the three-wheel motorcycle, when I was at Kramer Krasselt. And again, people always ask me how I transitioned. Well, it turns out I was doing much of the same things. So an example would be, I did a motorcycle ride from Sacramento to Las Vegas to Durango, Colorado for Spyder. And we followed them along. We shot video. I was writing like long form blogs about, we followed a certain group of motorcycle riders, and I'd write about their daily journey, what they saw, what they loved about Spyder. We'd shoot. I had a videographer with me, and we shot video that day, and then we'd edit it at night and post it the next day. And Instagram and Vine and all these sorts of things were kind of new on the social media end, and I was doing those each day too. So it was much more of a natural progression for me, coming from a newspaper where I was sort of doing this multimedia work. And then from there, I found myself at BVK. So I was hired specifically to work at BVK to work on the Citgo Feeling Good road trip, which at the time was, the largest advertising campaign that they'd done. It was, they had put 2 improv actors in a van, and we traveled around the U.S. The campaign lasted for 2 years, and I was on the road for 6 months. So, my Marriott points are looking really good right now. But, every sicko was locally owned was the idea behind that campaign and selling through that idea. So a lot of sickos were giving back to like a children's hospital, or they supported the local T-ball team, or something along those lines, or they they donated books to a school. So we would go to the school, interview the students, they'd talk about what they learned in the books, and we'd turn this into this kind of multimedia extravaganza. And I ran the social media. So, we through YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything that was going on at the time, we told the story of these guys' journey going through the U.S. And shining a spotlight on all the good that Citgo was doing. And from there, I worked for the Dominican Republic Ministry of Tourism. So that entailed going down there, and we wanted to do something a little bit different. You look at a tropical vacation, and so many times you see beautiful palm trees and a beach, and we all kind of get that. Our idea was to meet the people of the DR. So we met a guy, who's been making cigars his entire life, or we met the guy who actually owns kind of, the jungle tour. Who are the guys when you go horseback riding on the beach? Who are they? What are they? What's their story? And, especially like how big kite surfing is down there. We met the guy who's working with the Olympic Committee to get kite surfing going, training in the DR. And we told individual stories to illustrate why people should be interested in visiting the country.
No, you get tough assignments, Rob. Tough assignments.
I know, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of the agency in a nutshell. And then once again, Ansay became aware of what we were doing at BVK, and I'd been doing some freelancing for them. And eventually, when they brought the beer on and the wine and the cider, they finally had, a full-time position available. And that's how I wound up there at Ansay International.
Wow. So, can I real quickly, if I could jump in, what's interesting, Rob, is like, you started off, you said you're a storyteller, and one of the things I also believe, and it's true, obviously everyone has a story, right? So every time we interview someone here at the agency, I always like to start it off that way. Like, you know what? Everyone has a story. I want to hear yours. One of the things that what I was struck by is you were walking us through your career story. Is I was kind of struck by how you spent some time really talking about your first position at the newspaper in Oshkosh, and I could sense the pride. You know, sometimes people gloss over that first step, like, well, I got that first. That wasn't what you did. You spent some good time explaining the benefit of working there, what you learned. I could sense there was some pride, and I thought that was really cool. And as then you were talking through going from CK to BBK, Ansay, I could totally see how that set you up for what you're doing today and success. And I think there is something to be said about that, where when you start at a smaller organization, you have to learn how to do a lot of things right away. And that is a skill set that's hard for people to learn when they've been in a big environment their entire career, because everything's so vertical. It's kind of like, okay, I'm done, you're next. But you had to do it all. So I was struck by that. So I just wanted to kind of compliment that a little bit. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a great observation, and that's totally true. I mean, there were times that I'd be working on the weekend, and they'd be like, "Rob, you need to go cover a house fire." I've never covered that before. I've never talked to a fire chief. I've never written about this, and throughout all my years in school. But it's like you have 15 minutes to get there. That's how fast you have to figure it out, and then you're publishing it on the web 2 hours later. So it's more of a mindset than anything that, like, yes, I can do this.
Work ethic and hustle.
Right. And I think that really helped. Like when I did the trip to Iceland for Can-Am, I think if I had known at the time that I was acting as account service, a creative director, a producer, a video director, the social media guy, I would have been like, this is impossible. Like, we need a team of 6 people. There's no way I can handle this. But I didn't even know enough about advertising at the time to think that way. It was just, okay, here's how I'm going to get it done. You know, I plotted out each hour of the day and figured out what we were going to do. And that's how I did it.
Cool.
Rob, I got to ask, because it's just interesting to me, and we're kind of jumping around here a little bit, but you've had a lot of agency experience. And now, how long have you been with Ansay for?
It will be 5 years in February, which will actually be the longest I've ever been anywhere, if you can believe that.
Right. Yeah. So talk to us. What do you like about what did you like about the agency side? What do you like about the client side of things? Love to get your perspective.
Well, on the agency side, it is fun if you do have questions like about anything you're working on, photography. There's a world-class photographer down the hallway at BVK. I can go talk to Anthony Giacomino or whoever, or just if I have a question on a video shoot I was going to do, I could go talk to Terry Burmeister, who's had 30 years of experience. There's just such a wealth of knowledge and personalities and everything at the big agency, and quite frankly, the budgets to go do a surprise and delight trip down in Mexico for FunJet like we did, or fly to Iceland, or take the Citgo we had a national TV spot for that campaign. All that stuff is really nice. What I like on the smaller side, like what I'm doing at Ansay International now, is I have a hand in everything. And as much as I like doing social media like I did, to do that 100% of the time, eventually I was like, I think I have more skills than this. I think I can be more than just the quote unquote social media guy. So I enjoy writing like I do now. Like, I enjoy writing our radio spots and hearing them on the local radio. I like if whatever my creative ideas are, I can present them to our ownership team and kind of be in control of where that goes. I like the aspect of being involved in everything. I think we're going to get into it in a little bit, but when Mayor Barrett was announced as ambassador to Luxembourg, obviously all our products are from Luxembourg. And that was just a really fun day, reaching out to all the local publications, letting them know about who we are. So many of them publish, 10 things you need to know about Luxembourg. And like in the Journal Sentinel, we were in there and I talked to them. And did you know you can get beverages from Luxembourg right here in Milwaukee? And just being involved in everything, and really, it's a very strong sense of satisfaction when you have success that way, because you had a hand in most of it.
You know, Rob, let's stick on that a little bit. So let's go back 5 years. So almost 5 years ago, you come on board and you're overseeing all the marketing. You've got your hands involved in so many different things for the number of brands that you represent. So 5 years ago, what was the state of marketing at Ansay for the brands? And what have you done since? I'm kind of curious. What was it like? What was the state, the current environment when you came in? And obviously you show up day one. Where have you taken it? What's been that like?
Well, it was truly ground zero, but I mean, there was no advertising, there was no marketing, but that's because the products hadn't existed in our market for more than 6 months yet.
Okay.
So I think they started bringing them over maybe in 2015, and I came on board sometime in 2016. But again, this was nothing new to me. So Citgo, despite being a massive oil conglomerate, when we started the Feeling Good campaign, there was nothing. So we started, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram from ground zero. Obviously, they'd been on the air and done other things, but social media had started at zero. And so many of the other brands I had worked on at BVK had started with no following. Because if you rewind even farther back to 2012, it's crazy to think of now, but like social media advertising and social media marketing was somewhat new. I mean, there weren't a lot of brands on it, or at least doing major things on it. So when I got there, it was truly, and I knew that going in, and that's what I wanted, was there was, outside of the Luxembourgers living here in southeastern Wisconsin, there is quite a big immigrant population from Luxembourg. But there was really nothing. So it was a matter of getting up and running our social media channels. A big step for us was getting on the airwaves. So we do a lot of advertising on local sports radio. Sports talk radio has been really successful for us. And then it was a matter of making connections was the biggest thing. So there is a Luxembourg American Cultural Center right here in Belgium, Wisconsin, which is just north of Port Washington. Working with them, getting an email list of the thousands of members that they have. So what surprised me too was just coming with preconceived notions of what we needed to do and starting work at Ansay and realizing what was working the best. That was email marketing, and that was radio. Two things that I, again, didn't have much experience with coming from the agency world, just because I had been so involved in social media and video production. But there's a very passionate group of Luxembourg Americans living here in the greater Milwaukee area. And they're small but mighty. They'll come out to our events. They'll support our product launches. We often have like the brewery owner or the vineyard owner over here for events, and they come out in force for those sorts of events. And from there, it was getting the word out. I think we've been in every major publication in this area. The Business Journal, the Journal Sentinel, and then a big breakthrough for us was getting into Forbes. And they did an article on how the second biggest market for Luxembourg products is Wisconsin, outside of Luxembourg. So it was really taking it from ground zero and building this entire apparatus around it. I like to think of what we do at Ansay as kind of a smaller agency, because we really are involved with everything.
Rob, this is. Let's just hang on this for a minute, because Kurt, what you were tapping into is really, really interesting. And Rob, I really like where you're going with this. Again, you come in now, and I know you've been doing a little bit of freelance work, so it's not like you dropped into the business. So you've got a little bit of knowledge, you got a little bit of experience, but going even from freelance now to marketing director, that's a shift, right? But what was your mindset? Like, how did you start approaching it? How did you start breaking this down? Some people like eat the elephant one bite at a time. What was your process on going, all right, I mean, was it just asking questions? How did you start formulating the plan for what to do?
Well, I relied heavily. So our owner, Mike Ansay, great, just an absolute great guy. I don't know if I've ever met anyone who has more connections. I feel like he knows everyone in the state of Wisconsin and in the country of Luxembourg. And I started working and, just asking him questions. Who can I meet with? Who can I talk to? So like I said, they had the products out for about 6 months or so. And it was really starting to pick up steam at Benelux. Downtown was kind of our ground zero. So if you don't know, Benelux actually stands for Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. And at the time, they had no Luxembourg products till we came along. So I'm like, that was probably the easiest sell. It's like, right, it's right in your name, guys. You got to put us on.
Right.
One of the very first events we did was just a free beer tasting down at Benelux, and something I have never stopped doing is just being with people who are enjoying the product. So that was one of the very first things I did was went down. We had a beer tasting. I talked to people. Where are you from? What are you interested in? What do you like about this? Why are you here? Those sorts of things. And up to this day, I've been in this 5 years, and I did 3 wine tastings last week, and I have all sorts of beer tastings leading up, through the end of the year, just meeting people, talking to them. So I kind of do my own on the ground research, if you will. And like I said, what I did to get us off the ground was, so Luxembourg, obviously, not even most people don't even know where that country is because it's so small, right? Or they think it's the Luxembourg in Wisconsin. But there is a very passionate group of immigrants living here in southeastern Wisconsin, and just getting a hold of the email list that the museum had and to activating the people who are really passionate about the brands was my starting point. So I have this big email list, and I can activate people to come to a festival or a beer tasting, and then kind of working out from there was my initial strategy.
And
I just want on the heels of you were saying with Mike, Mike Ansay being very, relationships, knowing a lot of people. When I was doing some research just on your company and I was going through the social channels, I mean, what I noticed when I was kind of going through the posts was, I mean, the posts are definitely, it's about Luxembourg and it's about relationships. And hey, we're over here meeting with, I forgot what it was, the commerce, but I mean, it was about the people. And I could see right away, you know what, there's a commitment here going on. It's not just about some superficial stuff. This is a commitment that this organization, this company is making to Luxembourg and the people over there. This is such a part of their DNA. That was something that really, really stood out to me. And so when you're talking about, the Luxembourg connection over here, I'm like, yeah, he's speaking exactly what I was kind of seeing in the short amount of time I was doing some research on you.
Yeah, so every summer there's actually a Luxembourg Fest in Belgium, Wisconsin. The joke is to get to Luxembourg, you got to go to Belgium. But it happens every summer in August, and it is incredible. People come in from California, they come in from Washington, they come in from New York, they come in from Florida. One time we had people decide to celebrate their family reunion. They decided, let's come to Luxembourg Fest, and that's what we're going to do for our family reunion. They're a big family from Minnesota with Luxembourg heritage. So that's where a lot of those relationships are born too. Like people come in for that whole weekend. It's obviously one of our biggest sales weekends. And it's just really fun meeting people who are so passionate about this. And then, I have to thank our partners too over in Luxembourg who are always willing to come over for a week of beer dinners or a week of wine tastings. And, there's a big Luxembourg Brotherhood of America in the Chicago area. And those guys are always coming up to our events, and we support their events down in Chicago. And it is really a very, it feels like a big family that we're working with. So that's been a really fun aspect, and it's very relational. We have an extremely close relationship with the Lowlands group, of those restaurants, and a lot of their people we've taken over to Luxembourg with us. So what we try to avoid to be, because we are so small and we don't have $100 million advertising budget, is we really are based on relationships. If we only did transactional work, everything falls apart, right? Like we go out of our way, we do our own deliveries, we make sure we check in with our partners and talk to the managers and we're a family-owned company, and we try to have that touch to everything that we do.
So when the World Cup rolls around, I know Luxembourg's soccer history isn't But, obviously they play over there. So are you guys like, everyone, let's find the Luxembourg soccer national jersey and let's try to maybe wire in a game somehow and show our pride somehow.
Yeah, we used to do we used to be out at when the Nomad World Pub over there on Brady Street has the big soccer matches on. I've been there. We're doing free beers. We'll come out with T-shirts. We got soccer balls, rugby balls.
Love it.
We get a lot of fun gear over from Europe.
That's awesome.
So those are always fun giveaways too. So yeah, leaning into that. They're also big into cycling. So we've been a sponsor of Tour of America's Dairyland for several years. And just kind of leaning into to the idea, it's a European brand and that's what they are. And so we just try to lean into that as much as possible. And yeah, just one additional note on that too is so many people, if they've been to Luxembourg or if they have family ties to Luxembourg or, heritage, they're really passionate about the beer. Like every month or so, I just post a photo on social media of the brewery, and it becomes wildly our most successful post. It's kind of like a cheat code. I can just put it out there, and people love talking about either their experience going there or their aspirational desire to visit. So they definitely have a strong emotional tie to these brands.
Hey Pat, you know what I've noticed? As we've been talking to Rob, I've noticed Rob has said the word passion quite a bit. That was an observation. Good observation, by the way. He smiles a lot, which is great. So I want to clearly, Rob, there's pure enjoyment in what you're doing. I mean, I sense that. I mean, what do you personally love about this brand? I mean, what is it about the brand and what is it you love? And obviously I know there's different brands. I know we're talking about Bofferding and there's Ansay, but what is it about the culture that you're a part of that you just love? What is it?
I think it's the team that I work with. So I mentioned Mike, one of my most favorite people I've ever worked with. And then his daughter, Kate. So Kate Ansay is our operations manager. So that's who I'm working with more on a day-to-day basis. And Mike maybe on some of the very big picture kind of stuff. Like if we're flying to Luxembourg, we got to run that by Mike first. And but yeah, I love working with the team. We have an awesome sales manager, Kevin Mazza, just a really fun guy, easy to get along with. And then another salesperson, Lauren Monier, who's been there as long as I have. We were kind of the two originals there. And we do things like team dinners at Christmas, or just when people come in the office, it's like you're happy to see them, and it's like seeing an old friend again. And the word family, kind of like storyteller, is one of those things that really gets tossed around a lot. We have a family atmosphere here, you'll hear. Well, this is an actual family, the Ansay family, and it definitely, that atmosphere pervades everything that we do. I think we have a great culture. I got one really good example for you, I think. So it's kind of turning a negative into a positive. So Mike and I, every year we fly out and go to the Big East basketball tournament. I know it's a big surprise with Pfizer Forum right behind me here. But this was 2 years ago now, or almost 2 years, when the pandemic hit. So the basketball tournament, we went to one game. The whole tournament's canceled. So then we're flying back. And I think at a lot of bigger companies, I'm sure there was a lot of scrambling. How do we handle this? And weeks of deliberations and things like that. And I just thought, well, what if we decide to partner with the Hunger Task Force, and 10% of everything that we sell goes directly to Hunger Task Force. By the time the plane landed at General Mitchell, we had decided that's what we were going to do. And I think we put in that into effect the next week. And credit to Task Force, they helped promote that with us. And spots like Total Wine and More, one of our great retail partners, they allowed us to put up really big signs that they weren't normally, corporate policy doesn't allow that, but they said sure. So the big signs went underneath all our products that 10% was going to go directly to Hunger Task Force. And this was still in March, and right when things were really crazy and we didn't know what end was up. just the ability to do stuff like that really quickly and really effectively has brings great satisfaction.
That's pretty cool.
Rob, talk to us a little bit about, because we're all drinking Bofferding today, right? So talk to us about where do you see that brand going? Like what's on the horizon for this? I know you've talked a lot about the importance of relationship and building that, and it sounds like you've done a hell of a job with that, especially within this part of the world. But this is only southeastern Wisconsin, right? I mean, let's extend it down to Chicago, as you mentioned. But how do you keep building this beyond, the I-94 corridor, if you will?
Right. Yeah. So this brings me to another campaign that we did that I wanted to bring up, which was the Drink in the Boff campaign. So we partnered with my last agency, BVK, on that. You got to give a shout out to Peter Capper and Brian Ganther. Ganther being one of the best creative directors I've ever worked with. And this was a really, really creative idea that made us known literally on a global scale, which was really cool. So it's tough on an audio format here to describe exactly what it is. But I would urge your listeners to just Google Drink in the Boff, and the photos will most likely come up. But the idea was that Bofferding is a 100% all-natural beer. So what better way to enjoy it than in a 100% all-natural state? So what they did is they found a couple willing models to go out into nature, remove all their garments, and enjoy a beer as nature intended. Let's put it that way. So obviously this campaign got a lot of eyeballs. The brewery owner over in Luxembourg called me to let me know that we were in a German newspaper that he got. We were in a Belgian newspaper that we got. A Luxembourg magazine called me, and I did an interview with them. We were in craft beer blogs and things I didn't even know existed. It was fun to go on Google and just plug in Drink in the Boff and see all the comments. If I could change one thing about it, it would be to not have a worldwide pandemic happen about 9 months after that we launched that campaign. Because that changed a lot of things, but it did show that with the right selling this with the right idea, that there would be or there is interest in this product throughout the country. And I can't tip my hand too much, but I will say there are opportunities to expand. I'll give you one good example, and that would be in the state of Ohio, Miami University, if you're familiar with that, the Red Hawks. Mm-hmm. The owner of Bofferding Brewery, George Lentz, is actually an alumni of Miami University. So he wanted to come to the U.S. to learn English and make connections and all those sorts of good things, which is exactly what he did. And that university also has the only exchange program between the country of Luxembourg and a university here. So every year, hundreds of students study in Luxembourg, and as part of that program, they get a tour of Bofferding Brewery. So now you have thousands of alumni with a strong interest in our brand. So there are other opportunities like that throughout the country. Right now, we're a small and mighty group, and we've just been focused on growing the brand in southeastern Wisconsin, Chicago, and those areas. But there's definitely opportunities for expansion.
Rob, I got to commend you, and Kurt, don't you love this? You keep going back to the relationship. You keep connecting with that. You keep finding new avenues. I love it. I mean, it's like anytime you think that, when I'm listening to you, it's like, okay, you maxed out this. No, there's more things. You could keep squeezing this orange and keep getting more juice from it. That's awesome. Hey, Rob, because of your crazy interesting background and how much you have personally done, firsthand, personally seen, personally been involved with, I want to get your take on a couple things, and that is, give us the state of marketing. Where are things going? And I'm really, really excited about this question because we're talking about beer, and the beer market is so freaking crazy right now, right? With all the craft beers. And when I was picking this up at Total Wine, I was telling Kurt, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, the selection that you have. And now that even kind of doubles because of all the seasonal type of thing going on. So, Rob, where do you see things going? Like, how do brands break through? What are channels that are going to be, increasingly more important in the future? What are channels that are going to be increasingly less important, in the future? Give us your take on the world of marketing.
So my background, before working at Ansay was primarily in social media. So I've always been particularly interested in what's going on there. And did you guys read any of the Facebook files by the Wall Street Journal? It's been this investigative report into Facebook.
Yeah, a little bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's been 14 or so articles, but basically the big idea to surmise it is that Facebook has been doing a lot of internal studies and research into their own programs. And what they found is it's making people, their own products are making people unhappy, upset, and that their products are extremely addictive. So I think that's not to bring the podcast down, but I think there's got to be some concern there if you're a social media marketer. And this isn't me saying it. This is Facebook itself admitting our products can make people depressed and they can make people addicted. I think there will be a major change because of that. It's not going to stay that way. There's going to be a major change in social media marketing. And I think you can see some of that playing out already. What I mean by that is there was a recent study done, and the only social media platform that left people feeling better after they used it was TikTok, which I found really, really interesting. And I also wonder if that has something to do with the fact that TikTok started as an AI company. So it was artificial intelligence, and all the other platforms are social connecting platforms. So I think, I'm not being Nostradamus by saying this, but obviously I believe TikTok is here to stay. But even apart from that platform, just short, fun videos that have something interesting to say, that give advice, that leave people feeling better about themselves than they were before. So I just working in advertising, I know a lot about how the Facebook algorithms have worked, and they do tend to change it quite a bit. So if you remember in the early 2010s, the reason we were so focused on video was Facebook was supercharging videos in their algorithm. So they decided sometime in 2013 or 14 that YouTube was their big competitor, and they encouraged people to upload videos natively to Facebook because they didn't want people uploading YouTube links and going off their platform. So that's why we got so heavily involved in video, was because you posted a video native to Facebook, it was getting 10 times the engagement of anything else. And then that eventually went away, and this is again in the Facebook files, they supercharged comments because they wanted people talking to each other, more engaging with each other. The problem with that is people tend to comment the most on things that are the most divisive. There's only so many ways you can say great win Packers, but there's an unbelievable amount of commentary that can be about, I don't want to mention, just political issues, let's say that. And that's why, Aunt Gertrude's, views on this issue or that issue are always up first on your Facebook. Okay. Whereas on TikTok, it's reading what your actual interests are. It's like if you follow a certain band or a certain type of music or a sports hero or whoever, it is just sending more stuff like that and leaving you in a better mood. So I do think Facebook is going to change its algorithm in a major way. And again, this isn't, they do it all the time, so I'm not breaking news here. But there is going to be a major change. And I know from our end, we're going to start doing a lot more short, fun videos that people love watching. And you can already see it. If you scroll down about 4 pieces of content in Facebook, you'll start seeing them insert Reels, which is their answer to TikTok. And I think that's going to be the big thing over the next 2 years. And I'm also interested to see what they do with comments overall, because even if you are advertising with the best of intentions, let's say you are working with baby carrots, and you talk about carrots and how healthy they are for you. there's going to be 100 comments underneath saying this is lettuce erasure. What about lettuce? You know, you can't win. If you say save the whales, there's going to be 100 comments asking what about the dolphins?
Yeah.
So the way platforms are dealing with, some of them are debating if they're going to hide likes and things like that. I do wonder if we're going to move to a place where we do away with comments, or maybe just have heavily curated comments. But I would just think from an advertising aspect, we need to be aware of what's going on with Facebook and Instagram, and endeavor to be a positive light. I think there's a huge avenue for making people feel good and engaging people in a positive way. And I see us moving a lot more towards that direction.
You know what's funny about the comments, I got to be honest. So you hit it on the head. So when I read an article or whatever it might be, Rob, you're spot on. One of the first places I go, because that's where I'm entertained, I go to the comments. I'm like, oh, yeah. And you just see it coming, right? You hit it on the head. It's like, I'm going to talk about, saving the ocean. It's like, oh boy, what did we start here? You just start going down and it's kaboom.
Right. Right. And it's addictive, isn't it? I am the same way.
Yeah. It is addictive.
This is no political statements on this podcast, right? But there was a picture of the Bucks player Bobby Portis, because the Bucks went to the White House. There's a picture of Bobby Portis, at the where the president usually speaks, and I'm like, I guarantee 14,000 comments are going to be better than the president we have now. And of course I was right. And it's like, people can't help themselves. I can't help reading it, but it's kind of this downward spiral into, yeah.
Oh man. Hey, Rob, what do you do? What content do you consume? How do you stay abreast of all the things that are going on? Obviously you're doing it, so you're living and breathing it, but what are the other things that you kind of, again, consume in order to kind of stay up to speed?
Well, this probably is not going to surprise you guys at all, but I still read a daily newspaper, like the actual physical ink and paper newspaper. And I don't know how many people in their 30s are doing that anymore.
Love it.
But I read the Wall Street Journal every day, and I just find their business coverage to be unparalleled. And then I read all the everything I can get my hands on Milwaukee Magazine, Journal Sentinel, the Milwaukee Business Journal I love. And frankly, and again, this will be no surprise, I'm finding myself listening to more and more podcasts than ever before, whether it's yours or there's one called Social Media Marketing Podcast, which is excellent. Everything I can get my hands on is what I'm just consuming information all the time. I'm on social media all the time. I've been lucky to kind of build up contacts over the years, and I'll chat with my good friend Dave Perry. He runs his own social media shop down in Austin, Texas. We'll talk about what's going on in advertising. So keeping a good network and reading a wide variety of sources is probably the best thing, what I find most helpful.
Rob Ebert, this has been amazing. I thoroughly just enjoyed talking to you. And Kurt and I were talking about this prior to you coming on. It's like you and I worked together in the sense that we were at BVK, but because we were on different accounts, our paths hardly crossed. So getting your story has been super cool. Thanks so much, Rob, for being on the podcast.
I appreciate that, Pat. And then Kurt, for you being on as well. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. This is great.
Rob, you got the last word, sir. The mic is yours. How do people find out about you? How do they connect with you? How do they connect with any of your products? Pimp it out, man. Go.
All right. So what I want to say is our new Bofferding Christmas lager is on the shelves now. And the reason I start with that is because it's for a limited time. And basically after December 31st, you don't see it again until around Thanksgiving. So it's made in really small batches. It's really good. Bofferding Christmas lager. I recommend checking it out at a Total Wine & More or Woodman's or Otto's, or Discount Liquor. We're at a lot of the big chains. And then as far as me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn at Rob Ebert if you ever want to chat about anything. And then I also recommend visiting Bofferding USA Bofferding USA on Instagram or Facebook to see what we're up to, and that'll be a good place to jump off and find our wine brand and our cider brand Ramborn as well. So
this has been fun.
Rob, this has been great, Rob. Cheers. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Cheers, Rob. Thank you so much.
Cheers.